historic Christian doctrine of marriage and sexuality. But speaking in response to this on AFR's Janet Mefford Live program, Dr. Everett Piper of Oklahoma Wesleyan University said our identity is in Christ.
Hyphenated Christianity is an oxymoron unless that hyphenated Christianity is in Jesus Christ. Our identity is in Christ. It's not in our libido. We should be following our Lord, not our sexual drive, in terms of our definition of what it means to be a human being. We're the imago Dei. We're made in the image of God. We're not the imago dog. We're not made in the image of an animal. We have moral culpability and moral awareness, and we can choose to do things and to not do things. That's what it means to be human. As the imago Dei, you should choose to do what's right, and you should eschew what's wrong. An animal has to follow his appetite and his libido. A human being does not have to, and you should never be hyphenated and described by your inclination. And that's the mistake the church is imbibing right now.
The Revoice Conference will take place in the historic Memorial Presbyterian Church near downtown St. Louis. I'm Chris Woodward.
An iconic American restaurant is changing its name.
We all know IHOP, right? The International House of Pancakes.
Pancakes.
Well, this week the company took to Twitter to tease a major change. For 60 pancaking years, we've been IHOP. Now we're flipping our name to IHOB with a B. They say they'll announce what it means next Monday, but already Twitter coming up with plenty of guesses. Breakfast, an obvious choice. Other guesses include biscuits, burritos, Bitcoin. My first thought was bacon. Probably wishful thinking. Well, not everyone is on board with the idea of a name change and questioning whether it's a smart business move. One person wondering perhaps the B in IHOB will be bankruptcy. Tara Lynn Wagner, Fox News.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and on the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Nothing can get done in the United States Senate for good unless we end the legislative filibuster. We're urging you today to call your senator and ask them to end the legislative filibuster so that we can defund Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in America. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121, or go to afaaction.net.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
You have been very critical of this president. You tweeted recently, in your words, that he's, quote, spiraling out of control in regards to the Russia investigation and his attacks on it. But as you know, it's Congress that has the check on that, right? And that's the power of impeachment. However, you warn against that and say impeachment should be a last resort remedy. Do you think that your fellow Democrats should be wary heading into the midterms of running too much on impeachment?
Absolutely. I believe that voting for a Democrat should not be seen as tantamount to a vote for impeachment. In fact, if it is, then I think we're going to lose elections we otherwise might win. Even Trump voters agree in many cases that this president needs adult supervision, and that means Democrats. And they're willing to vote for Democrats, or at least entertain voting for Democrats, so long as we separate ourselves from the I word.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Well, that's an interesting take on what the Democrats are willing to do, because they're basically saying, we don't want to run on impeachment, but he's definitely not saying it's not something they don't want. In other words, we still want the impeachment, but we don't need to run on it because it's not a successful platform for us. So they're waking up to the fact that most Americans don't want to be drugged through Bill Clinton Part 2, where the Republicans made the mistake of trying to impeach President Clinton. They did impeach him, but that was a mistake. It was totally an error on the part of the Republicans to do that. And we can say that because we've had all of these years of intervening time to kind of look back over it and examine the results of that and the societal perceptions of taking a president through the woodshed over lies that he told about extramarital affairs. We don't approve of that, but you certainly exacerbate the problem by making it into an impeachable offense when really it kind of wasn't. And so we can say that now. It doesn't mean we agree with what he did or that we approve of it. It means that the impeachment was largely negative for the Republicans, and the American people didn't like being forced to sit through hours and hours and hours of this testimony by President Clinton and everyone else who was involved, and the resulting carnage. It's well documented. So welcome to the show, everybody. Stacey Washington, host of Stacey on the Right. StaceyOnTheRight.com is where you can find out more about me and what I'm doing. Read some of the posts that we put up over there. My columns are over there. And then you also have UrbanFamilyTalk.com and AFR.net, the home of the ministry Urban Family Talk. It's a ministry of American Family Radio, and we're so glad to be here with you today. We have a jam-packed show. We actually have a little bit of a change to our original plan, which, it's still awesome. We are going to have 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, Jack Tilley, come on in the next segment to talk to us about the new jobs forecast and what that means for our American economy, and the 18-year low of a 3.8% unemployment rate. It's good news for us, but he has some interesting takes on that. And then we're also going to have in hour 2, John Zmirak, editor of The Stream. He's going to come on and talk to us about the Miss America pageant. So remember yesterday we announced just a moment on the show about how the Miss America pageant had basically eliminated the swimsuit competition. But there's more to it than that. It's a far-ranging, sweeping change that's being made. And I want to get John's take on it because he's comparing it to the changes that have been recently enacted over at the Boy Scouts. Now, this is something interesting, the comparison. So we'll talk to him about that. We also have, obviously, the California election results, which we're going to get into. The commutation of Alice Johnson's life sentence and the surrounding furor around that. The president is hosting, I believe it's tonight, an iftar dinner. I saw on the schedule for today from the White House that the president will have undisclosed individuals. That as the event begins, the press pool will send out a list of names who attended this event, the iftar dinner. It celebrates the close of Ramadan, and this has been done since the Bush administration to honor Muslim Americans and their faith in Islam and all of that. And President Trump is hosting one of those dinners tonight. And so, you can't, you're pinged if you do, you're pinged if you don't. In President Trump's case, if he didn't host the iftar dinner, which I was actually wondering, I was actually kind of thinking to myself, will he host it? Will he actually host this dinner because of, some of the public statements that he's made, because of his crackdown on immigration from majority Muslim countries that don't have, vetting procedures in place, et cetera. All of the discussion about the Muslim ban and some of his comments on the campaign trail, which I didn't disagree with, but I know they were taken, askance by many, many Americans. And I wondered if he'd have the dinner. Well, not only is he having the dinner on schedule, just like any other president would, but now he's being taken to task by Muslim groups who are saying that he doesn't have the right to celebrate the iftar. He doesn't have the right. So it doesn't matter if he does what he's expected to do or if he does the thing that the good virtue signaling liberals would do to make sure that everyone knows, here's my monthly flag of this religion or this ethnic background or whatever to prove to you that I'm not a racist. When a conservative does it, it's always, he doesn't have the right to do that. How dare he do that? If he didn't do it, they'd be saying, well, look at how he treats Muslim Americans. He won't even honor their day. He won't honor the close of their most holy month. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then I found some audio, it's kind of amazing. YouTube is forever. That there's it's a mashup of previous presidents discussing the jobs report before it came out, basically previewing it the same way that President Trump did. Only when President Trump did it, it was a break in protocol and another example of his inability to govern like other presidents have done. But those same media outlets and reporters who were castigating President Trump didn't have anything to say when President Obama did the exact same thing. And he did it actually more times because obviously he was president for 8 years and President Trump's only been in for a year. So we're going to get into that. I want to talk about the California election results, but first, let's listen to this audio bite of John Cox. It's his victory speech. He won the Republican nomination to run up against Gavin Newsom, and he has some things to say about Gavin Newsom to Gavin Newsom. And so during his acceptance speech, victory speech, he took him to task, and I thought it was really fantastic. It's number 5.
Mr. Newsom made it clear that he wanted to run against me instead of another Democrat. Well, as I told him in San Jose at the debate, be careful, Mr. Newsom. Be careful for what you wish for. Mr. Newsom and his corrupt cronies they did a bunch of ads touting their opposition to the president. Well, let's send him the very first message, and that is it wasn't Donald Trump who made California the highest tax state in the country. It was Gavin Newsom and the Democrats. It wasn't President Trump who gave us a $52 billion gas tax increase without any reform of Caltrans, one of the most wasteful and inefficient agencies in the country. It wasn't Donald Trump who gave us that gas tax. It was Gavin Newsom, and we're going to repeal that tax in November. It wasn't President Trump that gave us one of the most expensive and failing school systems in the country. This is absolutely criminal to deprive our children of the education they deserve. We know it. The extra tax money that they passed in Prop 30, it's not going into the classroom. It's going to administrators and pensions. We need to get that money into the classroom, and we need to give our children and our parents the education they deserve.
So he went on for quite a bit after that, and it was all really great stuff because he took direct examples from the things that Californians are going through under strictly one-party Democratic rule, from local governments all the way up to the top, meaning the governorship. And he hit him hard on the stuff that is the bread and butter, the stuff that really people care about. National politics. People care about foreign policy. People care about North Korea. But that's not the stuff they sit down and talk about at the dinner table. That's not the stuff that late at night after the kids have gone to bed, parents are talking to each other about. You're poring over your kids' grades, or you're wondering why their test scores are so low, or you're wondering why the air conditioning's out at their school and it's not been fixed, or you're wondering why their teacher is sending home homework about sex acts and sex positions and, same-sex attraction and all of that, but you haven't seen anything from them, no special notes or anything about reading, math, civics, science. There's nothing educational coming home. It's all social justice and sex policy. And honestly, if you don't believe me, just check your child's backpack. And if you're not doing that, I'm asking you, for your own sake, because later when you find out what's been going on, the regret will keep you up at night. Your child's backpack should be the first thing you look into after you look into their eyes and give them a kiss after school or after work in the evening. Whenever you first see them, you should be looking in that backpack, and you should be looking in their homework folder and seeing all of the work that they're bringing home. And if they're not bringing you any work home, that's a great reason to pop by the school or call over and make an appointment and show up and say, I'd like to review all of my child's binders and just take a look at their work. I just want to check on their progress. It's not an adversarial meeting. And the reason you're doing this is because, first of all, your tax dollars pay for the building. Your tax dollars pay for everything that happens in the building. And your tax dollars pay for the salaries of every person in the building. That's if you got a kid going there or not. But if your children are there, now you've got your tax dollars there. You've got your most precious thing you've got in your home is your children. You've got them there. Why aren't you there on a regular basis? Not just the 2 times for parent-teacher conference per year, but the other events that they're hosting. If they're having special story time with a special guest, that's a great time for you to stop in at the office, sign in, get a pass, and go sit down in the library and listen to the story time. A great time for you to go and volunteer at the library. You have personal days at work, and if you're not working, if you're a stay-at-home mom, you have zero excuse. There is no lunch or garden party or other volunteer work that you can do that's more important than regularly visiting your child's school. That's what keeps these impulses for people to teach kids these horrible things in check. If they know they're going to see you once a week on the copy committee, because the people on the copy committee see every piece of paper every child gets because they make the copies. You get the original, and you make 12 copies for that small class, 22 copies for the bigger class. You make a copy of every single document that the children see. You give the originals back to the teacher in a folder, and you hand them back the copies so they can pass them out during the day. If there's no copy committee at your kid's school, maybe they have teacher's assistants doing that work. It doesn't mean you can't stop in and offer these overworked people your time to help And the added benefit of you doing that is that you get to see what your children are seeing. Because not every piece of paper that your child touches at school comes home as a piece of finished graded work. Some of it is kept in their file, and that file is kept in the office, and a copy of that file is kept at the district office where the administrators are, so that they can have records of your child's progress. You have a right to view all of those things. But more than that, you want to be plugged in, because a teacher who has to look you in the eye when you say you're planning on taking a banana and putting a condom on it for the fourth graders, why? Why do they need to know how to put a condom on a banana? Why are they talking about sex at that level beyond general anatomy? Why? And also, I noticed my child's standardized test, or their end of course exam, or their end of semester, quarter exam, quarter test, semester exam. She scored a 76, but all of her grades from you are A's and B's. So her test scores reflect a C, but her grades are A and a B, or they're A's or they're B's. Or why is my child in grade school not proficient or advanced on, and then it's the basics, the math, the science, the reading. Your children need to be proficient, which is at grade level, or advanced. This is what some people, naysayers, would say is time consuming, and you're like nanny stating them and blah, 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 blah. But I know for my kids, there was no amount of time that was too great for me to be in that building. And that was my role that I assumed as a stay-at-home mom. And my husband would attend all of the events with me, anything in the evening, anything in the day he could get away for. But most of his contribution was in the evening. And then we divided up the tutoring activities, things that I wasn't as, math is not fun for me, but it is for my husband. He loves it. So he made math fun for the kids. I did the reading and comm arts and science and stuff like that. And in that, we got to know, not just, oh, this kid was, in timeout today, or this kid's mom showed up, he got sick in class, or this kid couldn't get up from his nap today. It was also, oh, this is the happiest kid in our class, or he's always in trouble. That's how you get to know the other kids in the class, from your kids and from also being there yourself. So, I started off talking about the California election results, but we've gotten into this big thing about kids' schools. I can't stress it enough how important it is. And you don't get the years back. But if you spend the time there, it's like storing up your treasure with the kids for later, when you need them to trust you so they can tell you about that scary kid who tortures cats and dogs and might be the next school shooter. So we'll do a little bit more election coverage from California. They had some interesting things happen. A judge was recalled. But up next, we have the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, Jack Tilley. He's our guest. Stay right there.
Hi, I'm Will Addison, and we are partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to save babies' lives through ultrasound. Here's how a nurse describes the power of an ultrasound.
Last week, just one example of a mom who came in was very abortion-minded, and when she saw the picture of her baby on ultrasound and heard that beating heart, it was a defining moment that just broke her, and she said, I just can't allow this baby to be killed.
By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in the womb, she will choose life 80% of the time.
I cannot tell you how many times a baby's life is saved through ultrasound. It's just an incredible tool.
Underwrite a free ultrasound and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. The other evening on the news, there was a story about some people who claim to be handymen, who do everything from roofing to paving driveways. Unfortunately, they're rip-off artists. Slick con men who prey on the unsuspecting. Not everybody who sounds sincere is sincere. Some of us are just too trusting. We need to be careful who we let get close to us. Others of us are manipulators by nature. We say some things and withhold other information to make sure we control the outcome and get others to do what we want them to do. In 2 Samuel chapter 15, David's own son Absalom begins to manipulate and orchestrate the overthrow of his father. We pick up the story in verse 1. Now it came about after this that Absalom provided for himself a chariot and horses and 50 men as runners before him. Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. Now verse 4. Moreover, Absalom would say, "Oh, that one would appoint me judge in the land, then every man who has any suit or cause could come to me, and I would give him justice." Then verse 6 says, "And in this manner Absalom dealt with all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole away the hearts of the men of Israel." That was his real motivation. He stole their hearts away. Absalom had an agenda, and he sounded as if he had noble motives. I want to be a fair judge. But he stole their loyalty. Basically, he was disloyal, and he kept his true desires secret. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Not everybody around us is honest. Trust is a precious gift. The best you can, make sure that the heart and motives are right before you give the gift of trust.
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the program. It's good to be with you, and fantastic to have our next guest on the program to talk about the jobs numbers and so much more. 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, Jack Tilley, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your service, sir.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, so let's talk about the jobs numbers, which obviously were stunning in there. It was kind of a better number than what was expected. Definitely a surprise that left-wing media was not really wanting to cover. They begrudgingly gave, credit where credit was due, but there's more to this story.
Absolutely. Nearly 33% of our veterans in the workforce are unemployed, and unfortunately, about 20% of them only make like $15 or less an hour. And the majority of them are over 40 years old. So when you start looking at things like that and the qualifications that most of those veterans have, when you look at, I was just listening when you were talking a minute ago about being a carpenter, computer, all the other stuff that you learn in the military, that it's sort of a shame that we can't find them better paying jobs.
Sure. And so we have, our country's veterans, when they were on active duty, they're leaders. And that's kind of a unique difference to a lot of jobs that you might find where you don't really have anything to do in a leadership capacity. But in the military, even someone who's enlisted and kind of at the bottom of the totem pole will have some leadership responsibilities. So they come out with leadership abilities. They know how to lead, but they're also coming out with unconventional backgrounds that they have to try to correlate to, a civilian job that doesn't have the same description, but they can easily step into because they're very trainable.
Well, they're motivated, and they understand exactly about it's about working as a team. That's what people are looking for. Somebody that sort of blends with a team, understands what the mission is, can accomplish the mission, and needs very little direction. I was just listening to your article that you was talking a minute ago about trust. They're trustworthy, they're loyal, they're dedicated, and they're motivated to do exactly what any employer wants them to do. The other thing is the family. We always talk about the family in the military. The family is a part of every job that you go into. So, I think the biggest problem that you have now in our country is most people, because of post-traumatic stress, are sort of nervous sometimes, I think, to talk to veterans. Because they're concerned about PTSD or PTS, I guess they call it now. Mm-hmm. But there's no problem. If you hire a veteran, you're getting a qualified person and a motivated person.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to point out about the PTS is that a trigger for PTS can be an unsuccessful transition into civilian life. So if a veteran has a job and is gainfully employed and a part of a work community, they're much less likely to experience the onset of PTS than they would be if they were unemployed, struggling, working through homelessness, unable to support themselves or their family. I mean, it's really a job is kind of it's a safety mechanism against onset of PTS.
Oh, absolutely. I suffered from post-traumatic stress. I was gosh, geez, it's been over 40 years ago in Vietnam, but I was overran, 20 wounded and 7 killed, and there's still things that I can't talk about. It'll make me cry. It doesn't take away from my job. You know, I'm a small business owner. In fact, I own 2 small businesses. And it doesn't take away from anything, but there's things that I just have to be careful with. And there's a lot of people out there. If they do have problems like that, they'll talk to other veterans, and they'll work through the issues.
So I wanted to stress, because I didn't have, we were able to get you on at the last minute, and thank you so much for responding to our request.
Oh, that's okay. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we have, you're a member of the New Day 5, each a man who achieved the top enlisted rank in his respected branch of military service. And your company is New Day USA, and you're working to provide financial services to veterans. Basically, you're trying to not only facilitate that transition, but to make it a possibility that all of our veterans who are so highly skilled can be gainfully employed after they separate from the service.
Absolutely. There's no question. You know, New Day really helps people get homes. They really help veterans sort of that are financially strapped, that really have a bunch of issues. They work with them and try to, you know, everybody, their dream is to have a home. And New Day, that's what they do. They try to help people attain that dream and to get a home. So, you know, I was a Vietnam veteran. I remember coming back from Vietnam, and when you came back, you was sort of bastardized. Nobody really wanted to talk to you. Nobody wanted to do it. And they certainly didn't want to help you. And you start looking back at a lot of the Vietnam veterans that came back there. A lot of them are pretty senior now, and I'm not sure how many of them are working, but that was just a terrible war. But veterans need help, and veterans need people to help them get a home or help them financially one way or the other. They don't need veterans aren't looking for somebody to give them a hand up. They can do exactly what you want them to do. They just want a chance to have a job, and that's all it is.
So talk a little bit more about what New Day does. I have the website up here, but I'm really fascinated with what you guys are able to do for veterans as they're making that transition and then afterwards.
Well, really, the key to you know, a lot of people talk about helping veterans, and New Day doesn't talk about it. They help veterans. They help veterans get into a home. Unfortunately, there's some veterans that are just really strapped on financially and don't have the money that it takes to get a home. And so New Day assists them in working through those issues financially to get a home. That's what New Day does. And they help as many veterans as they can every year, that's for sure. Not just the veterans, but also the families.
So now let's get back to the jobs, because these numbers are so stunning. They're so outstanding. And it's not just overall, but in individual categories that they track, such as African-American employment. We're talking about all of the numbers being simply stellar, almost too good to describe was what one news organization said, which that is high praise coming from a media that normally is arrayed against President Trump and his administration. People have to admit that the tax cut package, coupled with the deregulation efforts, across the board, have really primed the economy for job creation, for small businesses, for large corporations, the sharing of bonuses, and now we're looking at the creation of many, many jobs. When I even heard the words full employment, like that, something we never hear, that those words were spoken many, many times since the report on Friday.
Yeah, I think it's a bunch of things. One is, I think the military. I talked about coming out of Vietnam. When you come out of Vietnam, you process out and you got out of the service. Nobody helped you find a job. Now they have a process they call TAPS. Is they really start about 2 years out as far as preparing you to get out of the service. I think that's one of the biggest things. So that the military is doing to sort of assist the people, and I think our country is a little more motivated about helping veterans, about looking for veterans. And once they hire a veteran, it's like anything else. They can't believe what they can do in their jobs and stuff like that. So I think it's a series of things where there's a tremendous focus on veterans. There's a tremendous focus on the military about helping our veterans. I think the ones I really worry about is, and we haven't talked much about them, you know, during the war we had about, I think it was close to 60,000 wounded and about 30 or 40,000, or maybe 50,000 killed. And I worry about the families of those wounded warriors that may not be able to find employment to assist their wounded veteran. That's probably the people we ought to take a harder look at how we're doing in that area. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So I get excited about the prospect of people being out there and being able to, because when you have a job, you have the ability to create a work history that enables you to move up. So, going from being unemployed to being employed, it's for some people, it's just like, oh, just get a job. But it's a huge first step, because once you're employed, now you're creating work history, you're creating, a reference, a relationship with someone that might down the road be integral to you getting that next position. But mainly just the act of being able to get up and go that, 5 days a week or whatever shift you're working, getting in there and making that commitment, doing it every day, as people have done so many times with, when you're on active duty in the military, it's almost like rote. You get up in the morning, you do your routine, you go into work, and it's ingrained in you. And so for someone who's out of the military to be able to get back into that situation, to be working again, it's almost like coming home. Because I remember on active duty, it got to the point where it was always, I got up at the same time, brushed my teeth, put on my uniform, head down to the chow hall. I ate my chow hall breakfast, and then I was carpooling with someone to work, and we would ride to work together. It was the same routine, 3:30 every day. Are you getting off on time? Ride home.
Were you on active duty?
Yeah, I was in the Air Force. So I lived on base in the dorm, and it was but I rode to work with the same person every day. That person lived around the corner from me in the dorm. We would meet at the same spot, take the stairs down, eat at the chow hall, go to work. I mean, it's like a routine that you can set your clock by it. You knew at 7:03 we were walking down to the car from the chow hall to ride over to work.
Well, how many years did you stay in the service?
One tour. I was enlisted, and I stayed in for one tour, and then I joined my husband here in the Midwest.
Well, I tell you, I stayed 36 years, and you're exactly right. I'm a routine kind of guy. I mean, you get up, you do your PT and physical training, and then you go to work. And then you come home at 6 or 7. So I did that for so many years. And for somebody like you that stayed one tour in the service, thank you for your service. But it's a little easier to transition out of the service. Now, if you have a person that stays 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and a guy like me, 36 years, it's a tremendous change in your lifestyle when you get out of the service. It takes you, I think it probably took me over a year just to sort of fit in a little bit more. That's why I opened up my own business, because it was just a little difficult to fit in. So I said, well, I know how to do this stuff. I can make it happen. So
yeah,
that makes sense to you. But yeah,
that's the way to do it. If you've been in a while, it's like you either go work for the federal government because it's similar enough, or open your own business where you can set it up so it's similar enough for you to be able to survive without, it's kind of the routine in the civilian world it can be just as regimented, but it is different. It's definitely a different atmosphere. And the responsiveness of people in the civilian world is, it's as varied as the day is long. Where in the military, there's a certain level of responsiveness, and just everything there's an expectation, and what those expectations are, and everyone's operating within them. And people who can't operate within the expectations don't last very long in the military, but people who can do.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
That was one of the hardest things for me to adjust to, because I'm used to, you give me a problem, I know the solution, I'm going to get it done now. But in the civilian market, it takes just a little bit longer to get it done and accomplished. And I almost pull my hair out when I
There's a lot more talking.
But you have to adjust. I mean, that's just the way life is.
Yeah, and we do. But I'm just excited because I think with you all coming out, being a New Day 5 member and going out and putting this information out in front of the public, I think there are people out there who own businesses, especially for small business owners. I encourage you, listen to what Sergeant Major Tilley is talking about here about there's excellent work stock in veterans. And so if it's a one tour person like I was, or someone who's been in for a long period of time, you're going to get an amazing amount of work out of a person who's used to being on active duty and working for the armed forces. You're going to really, it's a gamble that's worth taking. And in doing so, you're really honoring our country by employing veterans. And just doing your part to kind of contribute, because not everybody is called to go into the military. But those who have businesses can definitely employ our veterans who are coming out of the service.
Well, I wish I could have said it as good as you just did. I mean, there's so much there, and the veterans offer you so much. People, small business, large businesses, got to take a chance. If they're not hiring 15 or 20% of the companies not veterans, they're missing something. That's for doggone sure. Missing
out for sure. Well, thank you for your time today. It's been wonderful to talk to you. Great to celebrate good news about the economy, and also what New Day USA is doing for veterans, and what the New Day 5, the group of gentlemen, highest level of rank achieved in the enlisted services and in your respective branches. Wonderful to have you on today. Have a great week.
Hey, thanks, Stacey. And remember, New Day just doesn't talk about it, they do it.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for coming on. So full disclosure, he is out of the Army. He was the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army. And my dad, my granddad, and my great-granddad were Army. But my dad recommended that I go in the Air Force because the Air Force has better facilities. And as you heard him say, part of his morning routine was PT, physical training. And so on active duty in the Army, the soldiers do PT together. So they do it every morning at the same time, and they do it together. Rain or shine, snow, whatever, they do it together. On active duty in the Air Force, you have a gym, a fancy, posh, like think Planet Fitness meets Wellbridge, and it's on base, and you go there and work out on your own time whenever you feel like it, as long as you can pass your physical fitness exam. And the physical fitness exam, when I was on active duty, was you had like twice a year, you would just head over to the actual gym on base, and you would meet someone there, and you have to run on a machine, and it got a whole bunch of things hooked up to you to measure your heart rate, and they take your body fat measurement, they do all that, they weigh you, take your height, and then you run on this machine, or you could choose to ride the bike for a certain number of minutes, and basically they increase the resistance or the incline and resistance on the treadmill or the bike until they reach the benchmark, and they're measuring your heart rate and everything, and they can tell if you're physically fit. Now, if you've gained weight in between the 6 months since your last checkup, or you can't meet the benchmark, then they would put you on, you have to be here at the gym this many times a week, and you have to sign in, and you have to show us that you're working out, and then we're going to reevaluate you in 30 days or 3 months or whatever. So it's much more like civilian, how civilians just go to the gym whenever they feel like it. So it was interesting to hear him talking about PT, because I remember my dad would get up and get out of the house by 5:30 every morning because he would lead his company in PT. Good times. Anyway, we'll be back with more Stacey on the Right after this.
I had a conversation with my daughter about making mistakes and not getting this Christian walk right. I had to explain to her that none of us are perfect, but we are all striving for perfection. Then I was listening to a song by 10th Avenue North called You Are More. The song really explained what I shared with her and reminded me that the enemy would like nothing more than to use the mistakes and things you've gotten wrong against you. But because of Christ, you are more than your mistakes. You are more and bigger than your fears. You are so much more than the choices you've made. And God's love for you never wanes. It never decreases. It never ceases to exist. Today, no matter what you've done or how bad you think it is, repent and rest in the forgiveness and love of the Father. Extend to yourself the same passion and grace that the Father extends. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32, it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left, just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki Addison of Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk. Family is so important to everything. I mean, think about it. Right after God created Adam, he made family by creating Eve as his wife.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference this summer. We'll have a full slate of experts to help encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family.
Our speakers include Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, and more.
We'll even be there.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference will be Friday and Saturday, August 17th and 18th at Hope Church in Tupelo, Mississippi. Come help us fight back against the enemy's direct attack on marriage and family. That's the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference put on by Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Well, they're inevitable. I mean, I think we spent a long period of time being taken advantage of, particularly by the Chinese. Some of it's been a little clumsier than I would like, because the truth is we have a great relationship with Canada. Our two economies are amazingly interlocked, and we actually have a surplus with Canada. So picking a fight with Canada doesn't strike me as very smart. But the Chinese it's an inevitability that for the next 10 or 20 years, we're going to have continuous tension with China, because they're a very aggressive country, which for 20 years we tolerated breaking the rules and doing things that you can't sustain they're going to be our largest competitor.
Oh, wow. So there's a lot of complexity in the issues surrounding us, our relationship with China and their aggressive behaviors towards us over the past couple of decades. And so to see President Donald Trump coming into office and really stepping away from the prevailing orthodoxy coming from previous administrations, which was we had to appease China. They have a bunch of our debt. They have the factories and the cheap labor that we need. We can't really afford to alienate them or to really push back or fight them. To see him coming in and saying, well, actually we can, and we will still have a good relationship with them, and we will exploit our pros, and we will exploit their cons, and we will negotiate with them as we would with anyone else on equal footing. It's a definite shift. And I know it makes some people uncomfortable, and that's why we've seen a lot of naysaying and a lot of, Chicken Little, the sky is falling, it's going to be a depression, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that's going to happen, but I don't know what's going to happen. We could only trust in God and be strong and courageous in our dealings with all of the nations that we interact with, including China. And I think that's what the president is trying to do. So I wanted to get into this story about President Trump commuting Alice Johnson's life sentence, and he did so after a meeting with Kim Kardashian. And I'd said here on the air, I believe, I want to make sure I'm being, full disclosure. I'd said here on the air that, it was kind of annoying because Kim Kardashian, she's a business person. She's a mogul of the internet apps and games and all of it surrounding just the fact that she's Kim Kardashian and her body and all of that. But then the result, now that we've seen that she's gone to this meeting, and I was also surprised to see that she wore a loose-fitting black outfit. She did not accentuate her body. She clearly was trying to keep the subject matter on the reason why she went. And it turns out the reason why she went was that she's been advocating online. I don't know if you guys ever look at her Twitter feed, but she actually has been advocating online and amongst her other tweets for a woman named Alice Johnson to have either a pardon or a sentence commutation or something because she feels the woman was over-sentenced. So this is something that President Trump took up under consideration because, believe me, when we're seeing the news so far this week that President Trump has pardoned some people like Dinesh D'Souza and Blago, who was actually corrupt and deserved to go to prison. I don't know if the sentencing was fair, but he deserved to go to prison for his corruption. But the president has been pardoning people. which is his purview as president of the United States. He doesn't have to wait till the end of his term to do this. He can do it at any point. And they have a team of people and an agency that takes care of these. You put your pardon request into the agency, but so many of them come in that, obviously it takes really a mountain to be moved on your behalf. And that's what happened with Kim Kardashian. So you've got Kim Kardashian West. She went to the White House last week, and she had already, I guess, been in some form of contact with Jared Kushner, who was also pushing for Johnson's pardon. Actually, they'd been in contact over the past several months over this issue. Per a source familiar with White House counsel Don McGahn, he's skeptical of the merits of pardoning Johnson, and the big picture is that it's a part of a broader effort led by Jared Kushner to highlight the issue of prison reform, particularly focused on nonviolent offenders, and the reason being that this is a cause of his. This is something that he's advocated for since before he was ever a member of the White House staff, or his father-in-law was ever the president. So according to Mike.com, Kardashian West had conversations with Jared Kushner. Johnson was around the conviction of Johnson, who was convicted and sentenced to life without parole in 1996 for her role in facilitating communications in a cocaine trafficking operation in Memphis, Tennessee. Johnson told Mike she initially became involved in the drug trafficking due to significant financial hardship after a string of unfortunate events in her life. She lost her job at FedEx due to a gambling addiction. Her son was killed in a motorcycle accident, and her marriage ended in divorce. And so then she gets involved in helping these people to communicate and gets caught and busted and sentenced to life in prison. Trump had been on a high-profile clemency spree. He's issued several pardons, including Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Scooter Libby, Navy sailor Christian Saucier, boxing champion Jack Jackson, which was a posthumous pardon, and others. And so, I have to say that the reason why I'm backpedaling on Kim Kardashian West after finding out that she didn't just go to the White House to discuss prison reform, but she actually went to get to seek the pardon for this grandmother that she's been advocating for on Twitter. So it's not some new thing. It's not like her husband did those tweets when Kanye West was tweeting about individualism and freedom in the lead up to the issuing of his latest album. She had already been for months and months and months, almost a year, tweeting about this grandmother who's sentenced to life in prison. And it was brought up to her by a fan. And so she took up this woman's cause and worked hard to get her out of prison, and actually flew to the White House and met with President Trump to put her name before him and to discuss prison reform. And so obviously we don't support the actions of the grandmother, but she's been in prison since 1996 for a nonviolent offense. And so you kind of think to yourself, this is Kim Kardashian West, a person that a lot of us as Christians would consider to be of a low moral character because of her past behavior. But now she's married and she has 3 kids. And this is something that she's been able to accomplish. She used her fame and stardom to get before the president of the United States to seek the release of a grandmother that she doesn't know and has never met. And really she's not getting anything out of this. And so I just have to say, for those of us who, myself included, who have looked at her askance, I have to really take a step back and reevaluate. It doesn't change my disapproval of her past actions, but it does mean that God will use anyone to accomplish his goals and his means. He will. And that, sometimes you wonder, why is that person famous? And then you see something like this. This is, to me, along the same lines as Ashton Kutcher being responsible for 6,000 women and children being saved from sex trafficking. Ashton Kutcher, he had a drug problem, he cheated on his wife Demi Moore. He had a lot of problems, and Hollywood was really saying, he's kind of like Robert Downey Jr. He's going to have to go through a really rough patch, and will he come out of it? And he has quietly reemerged, and his life's work is this cause of rescuing women and girls or women and children from sex trafficking. 6,000 lives. And so, I'm taking some things back. I am. And I'm really happy to see this result that it's just someone who's on reality television and whose whole life revolves around clothing and half-naked pictures of themselves on Instagram took some time out from all of that to rescue a woman from prison who, she's been rotting there for a long time. Others who've done much worse than she has, people who've raped and sexually assaulted people, have gone to prison and gotten out and gone on to reoffend and do other things, and she's been in prison the whole time. So it's pretty wonderful. I have to give credit where it's due. I think it's wonderful that Kim Kardashian West took this on and did it and got it done. So now I want to get back to the California election results. And this is, to me, this is the fascinating story. This is the story out of California. Besides the fact that they had what's called a jungle primary and they were trying to eliminate some candidates and whatever it was that they were trying to do with the party apparatus, it didn't work. And you got Gavin Newsom, who's the lieutenant governor, coming out on top for the Democrats. And he's already got aspirations, presidential aspirations. Sound familiar? I'm not going to be petty and go into all that right now. But just think it through. Who is connected in some way to here in the state of Missouri who had presidential aspirations and was everything and is now no longer in office? You can't get ahead. Don't put the cart ahead of the horse. So you've got Judge Aaron Persky, in addition to the gubernatorial race and some other races that were pretty interesting in California last night. You've got this guy, Judge Aaron Persky. Now, you'll remember this story. There was this really affluent kid, David Brock. And the reason why his name sounds familiar to you is because David Brock had sexually assaulted a woman on college campus. She was unconscious, and 2 exchange students from Denmark were riding their bikes across the campus and saw him on top of the girl outside behind a dumpster and went over and did like a citizen's arrest. Now, he was under the influence, but he was conscious, obviously, and she was not. And this guy, Brock, went, obviously he was arrested, and his dad came out on his behalf, and they had quite a bit of money, and so they were able to, get him released, and he's taken to trial, and the judge, Aaron Persky, gave him 6 months suspended sentence. I want to make sure. Yeah. So you got Brock Turner. I'm sorry, I'm calling him David Brock. Brock Turner. He was a Stanford student, and this was back in 2016. So you guys remember this story. It was all over the news. Brock Turner's dad had said something really terrible in the courtroom, and it was so embarrassing for the family of the Jane Doe because they protected her identity. And this is one night late in January of 2015. He tried to run away. They arrest him. The woman's 22. He's 19. The crime that he was eventually convicted of is punishable by 14 years in prison. The prosecutor sought 6 years. But Persky, the judge, noted that the court's probation officer had recommended a jail sentence of 1 year or less after speaking with the victim. The judge also cited Turner's youth and lack of criminal record, the severe impact a prison's term would have on him, his obligation to register annually with the police as a sex offender for the rest of his life. And the victim, who was identified only as Emily Doe, spoke at the sentencing hearing, telling Turner, "You took away my worth, my privacy, my energy, my time, my safety, my intimacy, and my confidence." She said, after hearing that he was sentenced to such a tiny amount of time, that the jail sentence was an insult to herself and all women. And of course, you guys remember the statement went viral. I actually had read some of it here on the show, I believe. And a campaign touched off after the sentencing that generated 100,000 signatures on recall petitions. And they enacted a new state law requiring at least 3 years in prison for sexual penetration of an unconscious victim. So a lot of really interesting and in some ways very good things came out of what happened with the sentencing. Now, post-sentencing and post all of these, campaigns and everything, a recall campaign was initiated and organized by Michelle Dauber, a Stanford law professor whose daughter was a friend of the victim. Dauber accused Judge Persky, a former Stanford lacrosse player, of being biased in favor of athletes and affluent white defendants. In one of the cases that he tried before the Emily Doe case against Brock Turner, he allowed a man charged with domestic violence to go to Hawaii and try out for a college football team. and then returned there after he pled guilty. In another case, he gave a domestic violence defendant a jail sentence that allowed him to attend football practices. And when the State Commission on Judicial Performance examined those cases, they found that, there wasn't anything wrong that was done. So I will say, this is the breaking news story of the evening out of California, that the voters in California held on to their angst and anger since the sentencing in 2016. Now we're in 2018. It's a completely different political landscape, and they recalled him anyway. He was a judge for 15 years, and he is the first California jurist to be recalled from his position since 1932. They recalled him. They replaced him. Now, of course, they have comments in the story from people who supported Judge Persky and felt that he was unfairly recalled. But they replaced him with Santa Clara County Prosecutor Henderson. Her name's Assistant District Attorney Cindy Henderson. She beat Angela Story, who was a civil rights lawyer, and she's now replacing him on the bench. So, I think it's a success story. If you don't agree with the sentence, or if you don't agree with the actions that the judge took in one case, is it enough to recall someone? I don't think so, unless it's extremely egregious. But if you look at the history of this judge, he really had an affinity for letting people off the hook for abusing women. And so it's right that he was removed from his position. Not everybody should remain a judge. And so, here I am again. People in California made a great choice here. Wow. I'm expecting a pig to fly through the window like it's doing on my t-shirt here. All right, that's hour one. We'll be back with hour two after these important messages from One News Now.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others. Visit afa.net/The Stand.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. President Trump says he has followed through on another campaign promise, this one involving veterans and health care. The president signed the VA Mission Act of 2018. It allows veterans to gain access to medical professionals outside of the VA system network.
It's now my great honor to sign the VA Mission Act, or as we all know it, the Choice Act, and to make veterans' choice the permanent law of our great country, and nobody deserves it more than our veterans.
In other White House news this hour, the president has commuted the sentence of a great-grandmother. Fox's John Decker reports.
After being lobbied last week by reality TV star Kim Kardashian West, President Trump commuted the life sentence of Alice Marie Johnson, who served nearly 22 years in federal prison following her conviction on nonviolent drug charges. The White House said in a statement, while the administration will always be very tough on crime, it believes that those who've paid their debt to society and worked hard to better themselves while in prison deserve a second chance. Johnson, the White House said, has accepted responsibility for her past behavior and has been a model prisoner over the past 2 decades. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
President Trump heads to Canada on Friday for a meeting of the Group of 7 industrialized nations. The White House expects a chilly reception from Canada and Western allies, already frustrated over his exit from the Paris Climate Accord and the Iran nuclear agreement. The president says the deals are bad for the U.S. and has signaled no change in plans. Politics meets sports as Argentina cancels a trip to Israel. Fox's Simon Owen.
Israel was due to host two-time soccer world champions Argentina in a friendly match in the city of Haifa this coming Saturday. But after the Israeli government moved the game to Jerusalem, Palestinian officials protested at the use of the disputed city, and Argentina has pulled out. The head of its football association blaming threats the team received. Israel's defense minister says Argentina has bowed to Israel-hating inciters. But in the West Bank,
I would like to thank them.
Palestinian soccer chief Jibril Rajoub saying sport should not be a tool for politicians. Simon Owen, Fox News.
Back to the U.S. now, where a federal judge says a school district is guilty of sex stereotyping by refusing to let a biologically female student use the men's restrooms. AFN's Bob Kellogg reports.
The U.S. Supreme Court returned Gavin Grimm's case against the Gloucester High School back to a federal district court last August to determine if the case is now moot because Grimm is no longer a student. Matt Staver of the Liberty Council says Judge Arenda Wright Allen now is wrongly refusing to do so.
Grimm is no longer a student. Nothing that happens in this case will directly affect Grimm in the future. And so this case should have been tossed out a long time ago. I think at the end of the day, it will be rejected on the lack of standing.
Staver says Judge Wright has ordered both sides to enter a settlement phase in this case. However, he says the school district needs to stand its ground.
The reason why she's wanting them to settle is she knows this particular ruling that she has issued, this outrageous opinion that she has crafted, will never stand up on appeal. And so she's trying to force them to settle.
When Grimm was still a student, the school told her to use the nurse's restroom, which she did for a while, but she soon sued the district, saying she'd rather use the boys' restroom, according to ChristianNews.net. I'm Bob Kellogg.
And Boston University is pairing with Johnson & Johnson to help fight lung cancer. School officials announced today the company will pay for a new lung center at the university where researchers will work to prevent and cure the disease. It's part of a 5-year research partnership between the school and Johnson & Johnson Innovation, the development arm of the New Jersey-based healthcare products company. That's all our time for this hour. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Now, one of the biggest immigration stings we have seen in years happened in Ohio. ICE agents raiding a lawn and garden business, arresting more than 100 suspected illegals. The operation targeted 2 different locations, part of the Trump team's crackdown on employers accused of hiring illegal immigrants. A company expected to face charges of tax evasion, again from the state of Ohio.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Thank you for being with us today. Oh my goodness, it's been a very busy past 24 hours. Today on the show, we're going to be doing this hour. John Zmirak, editor of The Stream, will be joining the program. We'll be doing a really kind of in-depth discussion about recycling. Why? Because you probably think your recycling is going into other things. In fact, if you listen to radio at all, you probably have heard it's supposed to be cute. I ain't gonna lie, I find it annoying. It's a commercial where you hear a bunch of children's voices and it says, when I grow up, I want to be this. When I grow up, I want to be that. And all the things I want to be a car. I want to be a house. I want to be a coffee maker. And you're listening to it and you're thinking these kids want to be machines when they grow up. And then at the end, it starts talking about how when we recycle, our old goods are made into new things and they're given a new life. And so it's very inspirational and it sticks with you because you remember the voices of the kids. It's very It's very eye-catching, very ear-catching. It catches your attention. So obviously, when you hear something like that, it spurs you on. And here locally where we live, the trash service that we use, we contract individually with them, unlike our old town where we used to live, where the town contracted with the trash haul service. And then they kind of raised our taxes by making it so that the amount we were paying in our taxes didn't cover the total bill. So we also had to have an individual relationship with them. So, kind of like paying twice, but it was a tax increase. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. So when we moved here and we had the individual relationship, we had the option of paying an additional $4 a month for recycling. And we'd already been recycling at our old house. So we signed up for it. Well, later I began to notice that on some occasions, not often, but it would happen that on recycling day, the trash would not be removed, the recycling, because it's in a separate container, separate series of containers for the recycling. And then on trash day, all of it would be gone, which made me think he's collecting the recycling on trash day and he's putting it all together. So I call over to cancel the recycling. It's only $4 a month, but it's the principle of the thing. And she tells me, oh yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but we're no longer charging you the $4 a month. I said, oh, so the recycling is free. And she said, no, we're still charging, but it's all included in your bill. So we basically combined it and it's not optional anymore. Everyone recycles. So basically the trash people are telling you, I don't care if you want to spend hours separating your trash, you're going to do it because this is the way we're doing things now. So I hung up with her, I'm like, well, I can't cancel it. I can't do anything about it. If he doesn't pick it up on the proper day, I'll have to start reporting, hey, he's not picking up recycling. Some days he only comes the day after on trash day and picks it all up. So fast forward to this story. Now, this morning, I'm running through all the websites, reading, trying to, catch up what's going on. And I see this story over at Investors. And the title is Some Inconvenient Truths About Recycling. So I had to read it. The subtitle is Environment. It has become an article of faith that in the U.S., recycling is a good thing. But evidence is piling up that recycling is a waste of time and money and a bit of a fraud. So you're probably thinking, oh, corruption, misuse, mismanagement. It's not that at all. It's not people tricking you. No, there's really nothing untoward except there's so much recycling now. So here's some stuff that it plays into this that I had no idea. And I'm pretty big on recycling because as I said, in our old neighborhood, we did it there too. But the kids' school would have them recycling and they taught them about recycling. And they had, Earth Day was all about recycling and the kids would spend hours recycling on Earth Day. And so I was really kind of plugged into it and I felt pretty knowledgeable about it. And I didn't mind them teaching the kids about recycling because I believe as a Christian that we're stewards of this earth that God has given to us and we're to control it and use it to the fullest extent. We're to exploit all of its blessings and its resources, but we are also to conserve it where conservation is needed and we're to tend the garden. The Bible tells us that it's our job. The head job of the humans is we're to subdue the earth, but it's the garden that we're to tend. So trash management is a part of that. And so the New York Times recently reported that unbeknownst to most families who spend hours separating garbage into little recycling bins, much of the stuff ends up in a landfill anyway. Oh, yeah. Get your dander up, get your coffee ready. You can be sipping on your coffee or your water bottle. The big reason is because China has essentially shut the door to our recyclables. So the New York Times noted that about a third of recyclables get shipped abroad, and China is the biggest importer of American recyclables. But starting this year, China imposed strict rules on what they will accept, effectively banning most of our recycled items. That has forced many recycling companies who can't find other takers to dump those recyclables into landfills. Now, one company named Oregon's Rogue Disposal and Recycling sent all of its recycling to landfills for the first few months of the year. Bloomberg says Massachusetts has issued dozens of landfill waivers so recyclable materials can be dumped into them. The Florida Sun-Sentinel reports that in Broward County, Florida, up to 30% of the stuff residents put in recycling bins ends up in landfills. Worse still, some local officials aren't telling residents this for fear that they will dun, 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 give up on recycling altogether. That's a part of the story that's so interesting that I was considering giving up on it, because when I thought he wasn't actually doing what he was supposed to do with it, the first thing I thought was, well, we're wasting our time separating our trash. So even without China's recycling wall, plenty of recyclables were ending up in landfills, in part because of single stream recycling, which again, I feel like I'm a part of this story, and you are too. Like, I know you're listening to this and you're thinking, that's our situation. We're single stream recycling. Now, they tried at our old town, they tried the multiple stream recycling. That's where you put all your glass and bottles and everything like that in one. You put your tin and metal and things like that in one, and then you put the paper in one, and you keep them separate. And the plastic has to be washed out, like your milk jugs, all that. And the glass has to be rinsed out, and the cardboard needs to be dry and free of crumbs and all of that other stuff. So it's a lot of work. Well, they found when it was multiple stream recycling that people were much less likely to participate because it was too much work. So they made it single stream, and they have all that sorting and everything that I was just describing. It gets done at the actual trash hauler. There are people there who move it around. This goes into this bin, this goes into that bin. So you got your glass, your metal, your cardboard, all separate. Well, when everybody went to single stream to try to get higher participation and encourage more recycling, the stuff that can be recycled was actually getting contaminated because not everyone is washing out their stuff. When it's contaminated, it's not usable. The market for recyclable materials has collapsed as supply has increased and demand has subsided. Manufacturers use less material, recycled or otherwise, to make things like bottles and cans. And lower oil prices make it more economical to make products fresh rather than cobbling together all these dirty scraps and cleaning them and making them, basically recycling them into new things. So as a result, prices for paper, plastic, glass, and scrap aluminum have plunged, in some cases down to zero. But that's not even the worst of it. John Tierney explained in an exhaustive analysis of recycling programs, which was also published in the New York Times, that recycling is not only costly, but it doesn't do much to help the environment. If we had those soundboards that some radio hosts have where they push a button and there's like blaring sirens, this would be where I would put on the sirens for a second and just sit back and sip my coffee. Because for people who've said that some Americans treat the environment like a religion, some Americans treat recycling like it's a part of, the same way that Catholics do the rosary and evangelical Christians, love Wednesday night Bible study. People who love the environment really, really get down on this recycling thing. Like if you're not recycling, we just had a little, the graduation party at our house, and I heard people saying, oh, they must not recycle. I was like, of course we do. We're like, well, where is it? I'm like, right behind the trash. You just keep pulling the trash thing out in the island there, and there's a bin behind it for recycling. And that recycling and the recycling in the garage filled up so quick because every can, every bottle, every pizza box, everything was recyclable. So it all went into the recycling. So I was busy emptying that while, the party was going on. That is how everyone has been conditioned. Recycling is important. Good people recycle. It's almost a status symbol. You don't recycle? It's like saying, you don't change the oil in your car? What's wrong with you? Yeah. So the claim that recycling is essential to avoid running out of landfill space is hogwash, according to this article at Investors. Since all the stuff Americans throw away for the next 1,000 years would fit into 0.1% of land available for grazing, according to Tierney, John Tierney, who wrote something that was also published by the New York Times, other environmental benefits found by Tierney are negligible and come at an exceedingly high price. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that I feel like the high price of recycling for us is not the $4 a month, or it's like more like $8 a month now. But it's not that. It's the time that we spend recycling, organizing things into containers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's exhausting. It takes a long time. And when you run out of space in the bins that they give you, you have to try to figure out what to do with the recycling that you're still generating in the interim until they come and pick it up again. So to learn that they're just putting it in the landfill anyway, why are we wasting all of this time sorting our garbage? So, Tierney notes that washing plastics before recycling them, as is the recommended practice, could end up adding to greenhouse gas emissions. The extra trucks that processing facilities utilize and the processing facilities themselves produce CO2 as well. It costs far more to recycle the trash than it does to simply bury it. Governments, according to Tierney, are wasting money that could be effectively spent elsewhere by doing this. So the author of this piece over at Investors closes out by saying, good luck convincing any people of this. Recycling is the new religion. As Tierney put it, religious rituals don't need a practical justification. And the author says, true enough, but then again, recyclers have no business enforcing their beliefs on others. And I have to say, you know, it's been such an effective job that they've done of conditioning us to feel as if, you know, as I said, you go to someone's house and you have something to throw away that's tin, you know, a can, a plastic cup, a paper plate. The first thing you do is you start looking around. You're like, do you recycle? Because you don't want to be caught sinning and putting your recyclable item into a garbage can, because then everyone else will see you doing that and think, doesn't she know she's supposed to recycle that? It's been ingrained in us. But there's also something that's ingrained in me, which is that wasting time is a sin. It's evil. And it also sucks time out of other things I could be doing. And my time is at a premium. I really need more time. And so when I hear that 30% of all the recyclables are already going into the landfill, and now there's a wall in China that prevents us from sending them our recyclables, our trash, our neatly organized trash, then I just don't feel like doing it anymore. But the only way we stop this, something that's risen to the level of a religion, the only way to stop it in its tracks is for people to refuse to participate and for us to basically, it's just a decision that we make. This isn't something I'm willing to waste my time on anymore. And when we stop doing it, they'll stop charging us for it because they're already unable to satisfy their side of the bargain. We're paying them to take the recycled items and bundle them up and put them somewhere, ship them somewhere so they can be used to make new items. If no one wants the recycled items to make anything new with, and if no one is doing anything with them and they're putting them in the landfill anyway, then why are we spending all this time and training our children to spend all this time organizing, sorting, and cleaning our garbage? It's kind of amazing. It's one of the symptoms of affluenza, when a society is so rich that they spend hours per month organizing and sorting and cleaning their own garbage so the garbage can go into the ground with the other garbage they didn't organize, clean, and sort. Wow. All right. When we get back, we'll have John Zmirak, editor of The Stream. We're going to be talking Miss America. Should women parade around in bathing suits? Should we care? Should only the pretty women get to do it? We'll talk about it. Stay there.
Okay, here's the big question with regard to any big decision. Is this going to work? Well, if you've heard about MediShare, a brilliant way of sharing healthcare costs, you may have wondered that. Yeah, but does it actually work? So did Dr. Stuart Hoover, who initially joined to save a lot of money. The typical family saves about $500 a month. Stuart saved even more.
When we first joined MediShare, we were immediately going from a little over $1,600 a month down to $460 basically a month.
So that's wonderful, but then his wife needed emergency surgery. The bills added up to $160,000.
So we were seeing the bills coming in, and then the bills were being paid. Portions were being shared, and the end result of this is this bill was taken care of.
Yes, MediShare works, and it's so easy to get your questions answered. Why not? You can call right now. Just hit **345. That's **345, **345.
Hello, I'm Pastor Joseph Parker, and this is Daily Time in the Word. It's our goal to help you better understand the great blessing of spending time in God's Word every single day. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 4, verse 12 tells us these words: "The word of God is living and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit, and of joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. And there's no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account." Again, Hebrews chapter 4, and that was verses 12 and 13. God's word is powerful. It blesses us. It guides us. It counsels us. It strengthens us. It lifts us up. It's so important that we're getting significantly into the word of God each and every day. If you're not reading God's word every day, I want to challenge and encourage you to start that very important habit. And I would specifically encourage you to start reading at least 3 chapters in your Bible each and every day. It'll bless you and encourage you in so many important ways. And to every parent listening, I want to challenge and encourage you to start having your children to read the Word of God. Your young kids read out loud to you each and every day. It will bless them tremendously, and it will minister to their mind, body, and spirit. We all need the Word of God. The Lord Jesus Christ told us, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds forth from the mouth of God." Dads and moms, we need the Word. Our children need the Word of God. Everybody needs the Word of God. So I would challenge and encourage you to start today to have your children read at least 3 chapters out loud to you each and every day. Pray with them and let them read the Word to you. It'll bless them and bless you as well. And it's one way to allow the grace of God to pour into your home and the lives of your children in a much greater way. I hope you'll start that habit today.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the program. I am so happy to be with you today and so happy to welcome our next guest. Frequent guest of the program, actually. It's great to have John back with us. John Zmirak, editor of The Stream. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
Hello. I cannot wait to have this discussion with you about Miss America, the bathing suits. I'm so tickled. I'm so tickled.
So, I saw some pastors online approving of the Miss America decision to not be a beauty contest and get rid of the swimsuit competition. I think they misguidedly saw it as the win for modesty, but I think that's a very shallow way to look at it, because this is really just an attack on traditional notions of the sexes. The idea that there's something particular about women's visual beauty that appeals to men and that makes women proud of themselves and that they feel sometimes competitive about. Kind of like the equivalent, I guess, would be football for men. Male courage, physical courage is something distinctively male. Women have physical courage, and there are men who are very good-looking. But the emphasis within the sexes, God-given emphasis of the way we are made, even despite the fall, the way he made us, is different. And they're trying to eliminate the difference between the sexes, the way they're letting men who claim they're women compete in women's sporting events. We're putting women in combat and teaching men, don't be any more protective of the females, of your female comrades than of the male comrades. You got to crush that sense of chivalry, that sense that there's something special about women that needs to be protected. You need to crush that because we're putting women in combat. So I see this all as an attack on creation, as a Gnostic attack. The Gnostics, they said that creation wasn't good, that God, the Creator, wasn't good, and they wanted to rebel against him. And I think that's what we're seeing now.
Perfectly put, but I'm amused because this is the same group of people, the Me Too movement, and those who are applauding this decision by Gretchen Carlson and others who are, heading up the Miss America organization are the same ones who brought us scantily clad women in the 60s, in the 70s and 60s, the sexual revolution, the so-called equality of women to use their bodies for pleasure instead of, respecting the way that God has made us, male and female. And every sexual perversion that you can think of, glorified, justified, and normalized for the consumption of the American people. And now, at the end of all of that, all of a sudden, a competition that judges women based on their physical attributes, how they look in a swimsuit, their educational prowess, and their ability to answer panel questions, suddenly
And sing
that's
or,
sexist.
And sing or dance. There was
Yes.
always this
Oh,
thing
and a
called
talent. Sorry, yeah, and a talent. Now that's wrong. Like after all these years, you know, it's one of those situations where this happens a lot. I mean, so far this week, I think it's happened to me every single day where I'm like, wait, you guys are the ones who told us that feminine beauty was the ultimate. You know, you're the ones who told us that showing off of the body was a woman's right, that women should be able to, stroll around in a bathing suit at a corporate 500 job and no one should say anything because it's a woman's right to decide what she can do with her body. Now you're saying we're not going to show off the body. We're not going to wear the evening gown. The sequins are an affront to womanhood. Now it's any woman, any size, any beauty level, and we're just going to judge them on their activism, which good luck getting anybody to watch that.
Right. This is the end of the Miss America pageant, just like the Boy Scouts destroyed themselves by saying we're going to have gay scoutmasters, and then by saying we're going to have gay scouts, and now saying that they're going to have transgender scouts. Nobody is going to belong to the unisex neutered scouts, the spade scouts of America. That's going to die. And to show you the level of perversion, the Boy Scouts of America for their next jamboree told the boys to bring lots of condoms. Well, why would they need them?
They've been doing that since the 90s, though. Honestly, they have. They've
really?
been
They
yes.
were telling them to bring condoms to Boy Scout
That has been the
jamborees?
policy
I had not seen that.
for decades. For them to for 15 years, the policy has been to encourage not just the Scout leaders but the boys to bring condoms. And I'm always like, well, is it a mixed? Like, is the Scout Jamboree a mixed event? Why do they need condoms if there are no girls there? So, I mean, there's a lot of questions.
What is this, Ibiza?
Yeah,
I mean,
there are a lot of questions there.
What happened was the sexual revolution was the victory of like the sexuality of a 16-year-old boy triumphing over all of society, and feminists who weren't grounded in biblical creation, they decided, well, men are getting all the perks in society. Men are better than women because economics and pleasure are more important than child rearing and the family. So we're going to imitate male values. We're going to try to be imitation men, and we're going to emulate male sexuality. Now, it turns out after 30, 40, 50 years of denial, they're finally admitting women don't really enjoy trying to be men sexually. Women really just don't get a lot out of promiscuity. They get less even than men do.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we need to do is reassert our feminine claims, but we can't connect it to traditional morality. We can't connect it to modesty or chastity or child rearing because that would infringe on our choices. So instead, we're just going to bash men because that still leaves us free to associate with whatever beaten down men are still willing to be with us without putting any restrictions on us because we still want abortion on demand for 9 months of pregnancy.
It's true. But as all of these things occur, there's like an underground movement that's happening as well. And I think it's so good. It's proof of God's goodness that children can see the truth in spite of what their parents are preaching to them. For parents who are out there preaching this sexually promiscuous, anything goes, abortion on demand, just you're an animal, use your body like animals use their bodies, and just put away all of these things about religion and God. For those kids who they've not been raised in church, they've not been exposed to Christianity in large measure in public school, they're starting to pull back from this and say, my mom is a working woman and she's liberated and she's a feminist and I never see her. She couldn't be at any of my events. My dad and my mom don't have a great relationship and their marriage is not the marriage that I want. And so they're seeking out youth groups and, Christian summer camps. And these girls are learning from their friends. They may only have one Christian friend, but that when they're learning from her, also, there is another option for me. I don't have to be a feminist. I could actually go to college and meet the man of my dreams and get married. And I could just, be a stay-at-home mom if I want to, because I've been told all my life I can do whatever I want. But they never tell me that I can do the one thing that I might want to do the most, which is be someone's wife and someone's mom. And so it's kind of an underground movement, John, but it's happening.
I'm glad to hear that. Simone de Beauvoir, she wrote The Second Sex. She's considered the founder of second wave feminism, which is really the radical, the feminism that wants to eliminate all difference between the sexes and eliminate traditional morality. Simone de Beauvoir actually said it should be illegal for women to be stay-at-home moms because too many of them would choose to do that. It tells you the mentality that we're struggling to get out from under.
It's domination. So the ones who are always yelling about we want you to be free, we want you to have choice, are the same ones who'll say, yeah, but not that choice. We don't want you choosing to go to college and get a degree, and then afterwards, once you're married, staying home with babies and putting all of your advanced education into creating a fantastic home and an environment where kids can thrive and grow, and maybe having more than your prescribed 1 or 2.3 kids, maybe having 4 or 5 kids because you want to, because you enjoy them.
Maybe educating your kids at home because you don't want the government brainwashing them to think just like everybody else. Look around how great those public government schools are.
Oh, I'm telling you. And that is the part that's most frightening. What I'm seeing online in comment sections, and liberals are starting to notice, well, the more people choose to homeschool, the harder it is for us to reach them with the true ideas of diversity and tolerance. That's the point, liberals. That's the point to homeschooling, to taking your kids out and going, I'm going to put them in the home and I'm going to school them here, and they'll still have interactions outside the home. But the things I want them to know the most, and a love for God, they're going to get that, because the one place you're not getting that is in public school right now. And I know not all public schools are to this degree. There are plenty of public schools here in St. Louis that you can still say Merry Christmas, and they're really normal schools. But there are just as many that are much closer to where my husband and I live that are just simply sexual indoctrination centers. And when parents find that out, they don't feel like they have an option,
Planned Parenthood makes a big priority out of targeting schools. And they've been exposed telling 12 and 13-year-old girls how to engage in sadomasochism with their boyfriends. And that is part of the Planned Parenthood so-called sex education for teens, is teaching them just really dangerous perversions. And because they have no standard of what is normal or not normal. They're teaching girls who aren't even of the age of consent how to be sexually victimized, often by older predatory males. And we know also Planned Parenthood covers up sexual abuse of underage girls, that when a girl who's underage comes in pregnant, they do not obey the law and report statutory rape.
Which is a crime. So, I mean, that's the part that incenses me, is that, even among thieves, there's no honor, because Planned Parenthood exists to steal the innocence of children, young girls specifically, but all children. And they exist to eliminate the life that grows in women who are pregnant, and thereby making them complicit in the abortion industry, because the most rabid supporters of abortion are often women who've been victimized themselves. And that is their thing. They convert people into supporters by, have these experiences, these sexual experiences. Get out there, exercise your freedom. You're just an animal that can talk. Do whatever you feel like doing. And then afterwards, if you get in trouble, come to us. We'll fix you up by converting you into a Planned Parenthood supporter. And then you'll want to go out and support the same things, because misery loves company. It's really insidious.
It's terrible. And of course, Planned Parenthood focuses on the inner city because it was an organization founded by a white supremacist, Margaret Sanger, who spoke at Ku Klux Klan rallies and talked about the need to keep down the numbers of the Negro, in her words. And one of her friends, Madison Grant, this prominent eugenicist, a close friend of Margaret Sanger, he actually exhibited an African man in a zoo in the orangutan cage at the Bronx Zoo. That man's name was Oda Benge. He was a pygmy from South Africa, and he committed suicide after some years after that because it just traumatized him. That's the kind of organization we're talking about, and it's all over public schools. And it's considered a mainstream charity, and our government still gives it $500 million a year in taxpayer money because Congress couldn't get its act together to fulfill President Trump's promise to defund it.
Yeah, he's done some great things with the Title IX funding, removing that and walling it off from abortion. But this is all he can do as the president, because he can't actually create and pass legislation. And I think this is one of the problems that we have on the right advocating for the pro-life issue. And the lie that they tell about us that we don't care about babies after they're born is not proven when you look at the statistics on giving on the right, how much money conservatives and specifically Christians give to causes that support women and children. It's absolutely false. That's not true. But what we do have is a huge chasm between the voting populace that keeps putting in people who promise that they'll take money away from Planned Parenthood and the actual legislators that we elect that actually never do it. And I'm talking about George Bush. When I hold them accountable, I start at the top. These presidents that we've had, these presidential candidates that we've had, we now know for sure that Mitt Romney wouldn't have defunded Planned Parenthood, nor would John McCain.
Right.
None of them would have, and none of them have. And the first attempt that we've ever had, the first serious attempt since Ronald Reagan, is with President Trump, who, according to all of the metrics, he's the devil. He's a horrible person. He's been married more than one time. He's cheated on his wife. He's just the most awful person. But when it comes to the bedrock issues, the stuff we can actually use our finger and our eyeballs to locate in the Bible, where God says, "Don't touch my anointed. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. I've numbered the hairs on your head. I number your tears." And he determines the day we're born and the day we die. That kind of bedrock Christian faith stuff, we can't seem to find anybody to support the one that they're looking down on, President Trump, on making good on those promises. It's pretty amazing.
You know, it makes me think, and I know that this referred to Jesus, and so I'm not saying Donald Trump is Jesus. I don't even know if he's a Christian. But I'm reminded of the phrase, "the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone." Well, maybe in a secular analogy, the man who the Christian right, and I'm a part of it, we didn't want to look at him seriously, who the social elites look down on, who the media makes fun of, that's the man who has the courage and the thick skin and the honesty to do the right thing on these things. And so that's why I'm glad to support him, even though I wasn't a big fan of his during the election. I was out there for Ted Cruz. I still love Ted Cruz, but I you know what? I'm glad it's Donald Trump in the White House right now.
You know, I see a lot of things that Ted Cruz has really been effective on since, the election and President Trump taking office. And I supported Ted Cruz in the primary as well. And I always felt like Ted Cruz would be much better suited to continue on in the Senate for a few more terms and then to go on to the bench as a Supreme Court justice. And that is still my hope for him. Yeah, that is still my hope for him.
Let's pray on that.
Yes, I actually am committed to that. I sincerely believe. You know how it is with people in leadership. Sometimes when they're doing the work, they can't see what the rest of us can see. And to me, his mind, he has some kind of like special ability to be able to remember everything he's ever heard or so. I mean, it's an amazing opportunity for us to have someone of his age and his ability to go on to the Supreme Court. So that's my hope, that before President Trump leaves office, he would appoint Ted Cruz to the Supreme Court of the United States for one of those vacancies that's going to show up. I love it when you come on. Thank you for coming on. And I'm laughing because this is all the liberals destroying all the fun stuff still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. God bless. Have a
God
great
bless.
day. Please check out stream.org.
Yes, stream.org. Everybody head over. That's John Zmirak, editor of The Stream. Stream.org is the website. We'll be back with more. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. American culture is in decline. Sexual perversion is accepted. Mass shootings strike fear into families. Television shows promote suicide as children's programming. Church attendance is down. Newspersons defend the violent gang activity of MS-13 under the guise of every human possessing a spark of divinity. That's garbage. The human heart is depraved and wicked and in need of redemption, which can only come through Jesus. In Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, we learn that we are saved by grace through faith, not from ourselves, but through God's gift of salvation. Instead of glorifying wickedness, we must start with ourselves. Are we obeying God's word, living and walking with Him? Is the evidence of our salvation noticeable? Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Jesus is the answer to a culture in decline. Let's call on him. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
Romans 13:14 says, "Clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the desires of the flesh." So what are you clothing yourself with? Whether we realize it or not, what we allow in our temples affects our way of living. We can't feed ourselves junk and expect to hear from the Lord. Clothe yourself with the righteousness of God at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacey Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right.
And at 7:30 this morning, he sent out this tweet, Brendan, looking forward to seeing the employment numbers at 8:30 this morning. But to send this tweet out 1 hour before it becomes public, the president gets that number the night before.
That's exactly
but we've
right.
never seen a president make any comment.
I dare you. Go back and look. Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama. Find a president of the United States talking about, tweeting about, communicating about the unemployment report before it came out. I dare you.
We're going to get a jobs report at the end of this week, which probably will indicate we've lost at least another 500,000 jobs.
Tomorrow, we're expecting another dismal jobs report on top of the 2.6 million jobs that we lost last year. Today, we learned that in the previous week, the number of new unemployment claims jumped to 626,000. Tomorrow, we're expecting another dismal jobs report.
On that point, are you expecting more bad numbers with the jobs report tomorrow?
I don't expect good news. I dare you. Go back and look.
So, welcome back to the show, everybody. You heard his voice. You heard the voice of former President Barack Obama talking about jobs report. So, when Donald Trump mentioned the jobs report a few hours before it was issued, it really wasn't that big of a deal. I'm just putting that out there in the record for posterity's sake. No need to get mad. No need to send me hate mail so I can send you Bible scriptures and love and offers of cash. Don't do it. All right. So I want to now get to a statement issued by Leader McConnell on his cancellation of the August recess because of the Democrats' historic obstruction. I mean, I was like, whoa, he doesn't often say anything, but when he does, he has a little something to say. It's number 4.
As you may have heard, I've canceled the August recess. We have a lot of important work to do as a result of unprecedented obstruction. For example, we've had 100 cloture votes in the first 2 years of this president, only 24 cloture votes in the first 2 years of the last 6 presidents on nominations. In addition to that, the president's made it quite clear he doesn't intend to sign another omnibus, and in order to prevent that, obviously we should do our work, which is to pass individual appropriation bills. Chairman Shelby and Senator Leahy, I think, have a very cooperative relationship in moving forward with that. We think we have a good chance of passing a number of appropriation bills In order to do that and in order to deal with this nominations backlog, it's necessary for us to be here in August and to do our work. In the short term, we're going to turn to the defense authorization bill and the farm bill before the 1 week around July 4th. In addition to that, we're trying to get time agreements on the FAA bill, on the water infrastructure bill. All of these we need to be trying to process between now and the July recess. So that's the schedule for the next few months.
And I think it's entirely appropriate. And it's not that I don't think people deserve vacations or they shouldn't be able to come back to their home districts and spend time with their families and with their constituents, but there are a number of vacancies that the president has already placed nominations. He's put people forward. And instead of considering these nominees and allowing them to go forward into the position so that the president can stand up a government, here we are a year plus after his inauguration, and we're still not done with this process. Hundreds of vacancies all over the government, appointments that need to be voted on, confirmation hearings that need to be had, and they're not being had because Democrats just don't like Donald Trump. Forget about the fact that this was not the way the Republicans treated President Obama. This is just wrong, period, on its face. That's it. It's wrong. So, anywho, you guys want to call in and talk about the Miss America thing or really anything we've discussed on the show, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. So I also want to get into, there's someone who's emailed me on Facebook, and I'm not sure exactly where I triggered him, but he says, you're remarkably ignorant. You're not stupid in that you can reason and are educated, but your perspective is pathetically skewed by your religious fanaticism. And so what I'm going to talk about here just for a second is the fact that it is fanaticism to email people that you don't know because you don't like their views, even if they're considered, in your opinion, to be a public figure. That's fanaticism, because Christianity doesn't mandate that anyone participate. There are no current, I'm talking about currently, there are no current rules or executions of Christianity where people are forced into submission and made to be Christians. So any person who experiences the Christian worldview can easily simply, I don't want that. And you'll find even the most persistent Christian apologists will say, okay, well, I hope you change your mind. And they might give you some information like, this is my church, or this, if you change your mind, would you consider reaching out to me? Would you email me, or would you connect with me on Facebook, whatever, so they can keep, basically they want to keep you in the loop so they can maybe reach back out to you later. But if you don't want to come to church or join a Bible study or spend time talking about Jesus, you don't have to. Meanwhile, on the left-hand side of the aisle, there's this persistent insistence on people who don't agree on something like, say, same-sex attraction and the definition of marriage being redefined. There's you will agree with us. You will accept our position on this. You will change your mind. You will stop preaching that. You will stop disagreeing with us on that. You will go against your faith or your closely held religious beliefs. You will go against your conscience. You will accept what we're saying because we're right and you're wrong. Do you see the difference there? It's that kind of rabid insistence on making you submit to their ideas that is the hallmark of evil things. It's the hallmark of communism. It was the hallmark of the gulags and the different things that you see around the world from dictators. It's not enough that they have control over your physical body. It's not enough that they can tax you at will or make you do things with your property at will. It's not enough that they have control of almost every other area or are involved in every other area. It's that they need to control your mind. They need to control what you think. Because if you can freely think things that they don't agree with, they still have not truly controlled you. And that's what I see in the emails that I've gotten. And I've gotten a couple of them. I had the one lady email me a couple of days, was upset about my appearance on Fox News. Again, I don't understand that. I have never once in my life seen someone on television and thought, I need to find them online and message them about what they said. And I've heard some pretty stupid things on TV and online videos. I've seen it, I've experienced it, and I've never once thought the thing for me to do now is to send some profanity, some personal insults. I need to look this person up and see what their family looks like, and I need to insult their kids. I need to threaten this person. That's just never occurred to me. And I really feel like it's something demonic that people are going through that makes them want to do that. And it's almost like they can't control themselves. And so they have to spew that nastiness. They have to put it outside of themselves and dump it off onto you. And what we're called to do as Christians, you get closer to God, you learn more about what you're supposed to do. And you're like, oh, so I'm not supposed to fight back. I'm not supposed to be, jousting with these people. And that doesn't mean you're a doormat and that you let people walk all over you, but it means that there's a way that we're supposed to answer back. And as I learn more about it, it's tough work. Being a Christian is actually much more difficult than giving into your flesh and cursing out every person whoever crosses you, or, going in on every person who is clearly, obviously, not only ignorant and ill-informed, but refuses to accept truth to inform themselves. But you still have to answer in love. So there you go. So I've got a pretty full hate email box going on over at the Facebook page. And you know what they say, you only take flack if you're over the target. So hopefully something's reaching out there to people who are listening to the show or seeing me on some of these appearances, and they're getting something out of it that glorifies God and will last into eternity. So I want to also talk a little bit about Mueller. He's been in the news. We haven't really talked about it on the show quite a lot, mainly because I sincerely believe that if he'd found evidence of collusion, he would have already presented that. He would have already tried to indict or tried to, I believe he would have done that already. And the fact that he's still looking and still digging is because he hasn't found what he hoped for. So ABC News has a story up talking about the Justice Department's internal watchdog concluding that former FBI Director James Comey defied authority at times during his tenure as FBI Director. This is really fascinating because I've been told to my face by a liberal, but otherwise, it's mostly been online on Twitter, that the firing of James Comey was unjustified. And people are basing that on the fact that they think that James Comey is like the underdog / Lone Ranger / Robin Hood. And he was riding around, on his white steed, and he was investigating the crimes of the president, and he was resisting the urge to acquiesce to, obstruction things that the president was trying to get him to do. And in doing so, he is this hero. He's an unsung hero. Never mind the fact that they were hating him the day after he made the announcement that the investigation had been reopened into Hillary Clinton's email. Feelings only matter when the feelings are the liberals and, they tell you that they matter. So this is interesting because this is a justifiable cause for terminating employment. I had previously called it disloyalty, that the president had suspected James Comey of being disloyal, meaning he refused to answer questions directly. He didn't want to meet with the president alone. He didn't want to answer his questions. And he presented a front-facing appearance to the president that was one of someone that, I don't like working for you. That in and of itself is usually good enough reason for someone in authority to want to let someone else go. And so that's not always what happens. I'm not saying every time someone doesn't want to work for someone else, the person that is in charge fires them. Oftentimes the relationship needs time to develop, and those times are forgotten, and et cetera, et cetera. But we're not talking about any old job. This isn't McDonald's or, Hobby Lobby. This is the FBI. The FBI director is in charge of the entire agency. He reports to the attorney general, but he works for the president of the United States. And so if he doesn't want to meet alone with the president, if he doesn't want to have, any kind of substantial working relationship, it would seem that he's not interested in working in the current administration, and it's probably not a good place for him to be. To me, that in and of itself is reason enough to terminate the FBI director's employment. But that is not what President Trump did, which I feel like it would have been better had he fired him earlier, because there was less water under the bridge, less reason for the, people on the left to kind of justify the fact that they changed their feelings towards James Comey. who was actively working to rehabilitate his image by declining to continue to be a Republican, if he ever was one, and by saying negative things about Republicans and Donald Trump publicly to rehabilitate his image with the left. So now a source has told ABC News that the draft report explicitly used the word insubordinate to describe former FBI Director Comey's behavior. Another source agreed with that characterization, but could not confirm the use of the term in the report. So in the draft report, Inspector General Michael Horowitz also rebuked former Attorney General Loretta Lynch for her handling of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's personal server. So on Tuesday morning, President Trump complained of numerous delays in the release of Horowitz's final report, which is expected to run several hundred pages long and be released in the coming days. Sources who spoke to ABC News were willing or able to address only a portion of the draft report's complete findings. So there's no indication that the president has seen or will see a draft of the report before its release. However, Horowitz could revise the draft report now that current and former officials mentioned in it have offered their responses. And, you know, it's expected that the report will chastise Comey for his handling of the Clinton-related probe. And the characterization of Comey as being defiant of authority goes against Comey's public-facing persona, where he kind of described himself in having a leadership style at the FBI as someone who promoted a new generation of effective leaders. So, you know, we all have opportunities in our work environment to do a good job. And James Comey has been relentless in his effort to make himself out to be the good guy. And I can't make any predictions. I obviously have not seen the report, but I feel like this report is going to be one of those glaring takedowns of someone who has spent the last almost year telling us what a good guy he was. And now we're going to find out who he really was. And he wasn't a completely good guy. So I can't wait for the report to come out. Hopefully it'll be somewhere where we can all take a look at it at our own leisure. But that's the show for today. God bless you. We'll be back with you tomorrow with more Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.